Hello, beautiful people. Listen, let's jump right into it. All right. So I just finished, or I finally finished my first book series of the year. And yes, it's Frida McFadden, the Housemaid series. You have the Housemaid, you have the Housemaid Secret, and the Housemaid is Watching. Now, as far as the overall series, it was good, but it wasn't great. Let me know if you agree with me, okay? Let me know if you agree with me on this. I've seen many people rate The Housemaid a 5. I did rate this a 4 as far as the first book, and I did rate the second book a 3.75. They're good reads. I like the way Frida writes. She was a new author to me this year. The first book I read from her was Never Lie, and these 3 books were the next set of books that I read from her. I do like that she gives first person points of view, and then she gives it from two or more different perspectives, from the main character and the other supporting characters in her books. So I do love that. They're easy to read. It's lots of dialogue, so you can flip through the pages pretty quickly. But it wasn't. I came in hyped because people hyped this book. I was looking at reviews all the way from the holidays in 2024, this just past holiday season. And I was like, okay, in 2025, I'm going to put this on my TBR to read. And I'm expecting to be wowed. And it was like, okay, it was a little underwhelming, but it was still good. You know, if you do like psychological thrillers and you need an easy, quick read, that you can just flow through, you still kind of get locked in on what's going on with the main character, who is Millie, then it will be a good read for you, or a good series for you. Is it a must-read series? Not a must-read, but it can be a filler read, okay? It can be. All right. So I did do already a whole separate video a while ago on the first 2, so I won't go too far in depth. But for those who know, for those who don't, the main character is Millie in this series. Now, Millie, when she was young, when you start meeting her within the first book, she is one who she feels the need to protect other women, if you will. So she gets herself into some trouble, which lends her to go into prison because she did scratch somebody from the surface. Just it was a little brutal there, but she did knock somebody out and alive someone, and it was due to her. She was defending her friend, as she says it. Her friend was getting touched on in unwanted advances, and she caught the young guy who was doing this to her friend. And before the guy can go to any further of violation, she kind of helped the girl out and knocked her out, she helped the girl out and just took care of the problem, basically. And she got about 10 years of prison time for that. And her family kind of disregarded her after that. Some people felt, oh, it didn't take all that. You didn't have to go that far with it. But that's what she did. So in the series, we follow her trying to navigate her life, trying to get back into the main world and get a job, but she struggles with that. So she ends up picking a housemaid job. And her first housemaid job, she kind of fabricates her or falsify her background a little bit to get the job with Nina Winchester. That's the first family that we get introduced with, that she works with. And Nina is a whole character. She has a daughter named Cecilia, which comes back in this book. And Cecilia in the last book ends up growing up to be a lawyer, and she ends up defending Enzo. So Enzo, long story short, Millie finally kind of gets her footing. She picked up some housemaid jobs, some house cleaning work, and she ends up being like recruited or a helper of sorts, of helping women who are dealing with domestic issues and can't get out of different situations that are harmful. And she kind of weed herself out of in and out of problems. Millie in this last book, she's kind of evolved. She's now married to Enzo, who was the gardener for Nina Winchester at the beginning of the series. And they end up having 2 children. They were living in the Bronx, but then they moved to Long Island. They bought a house that they ultimately can't afford. And so Enzo's trying to meet all the neighbors and get some yard work. But a couple of the neighbors, one is nosy, okay, looks at everything, what's going on at everybody's house, because from their house they can see each of the houses and what's going on in the front, who's going in and out, and they pay attention. It's an old lady named Janice who pays attention to everything. And then you have another right next door neighbor who is married with a husband, and she's kind of pretty and she kind of flirts with Enzo, and that becomes the issue. But we find that Millie in this whole series, and let me know, do you agree? Millie is a character who tends to be undecisive, very undecisive, until it's to the moment when she has to defend someone. She feels like she's defending herself or someone else. She makes a lot of assumptions that gets her into unnecessary trouble, and then she has to work her way out of trouble. Luckily, she's made a friend with one of the NYPDs who helped her out in the last situation, in the Housemaid Secret. And because she makes assumptions a lot, and she assumes without getting all the information or investigating, she goes through getting high blood pressure. And this book, it starts to get like pick up the pace, and you kind of get in the active flow once you get past part 2. All right, part 2 and specifically part 3 and 4, it starts to pick up the pace. And in this one, she's not the housemaid in this one. She's moved on to social work. She was able to move on from that and get a job. But the neighbor has a housemaid who ends up, Millie gets forced into allowing this lady to clean for their house as well, even though they can't afford her. And the lady ends up being in a domestic violence situation herself. She looked up Millie Wilhelmina's Calloway's information about her past early on, but she seems really weird, really stalkish, and Millie doesn't trust her. She catches her stealing, taking stuff out the drawers, but come to find out the lady is trying to get away from her husband, trying to build up as much money and stamina that she can. And Enzo finds out, ends up helping her. But the next door neighbor's husband gets done with, okay? And it's a lot going on because the kids end up being involved. The husband of the next door neighbor ends up keeping the kid, the little boy Nico, locked up in a small room in their house, or a cutaway little section in the house that's hidden. It's like a hidden passage, hidden door, and it's hidden by the bookcase. And so it doesn't explicitly say that the boy was touched or anything like that, but it says he was playing with toys and the husband had a camera in there. And the reason Millie let the boy go over there is because he broke their window, and she's like, okay, we don't have enough to pay for the window. Can you just let him come over and learn responsibility and clean up around your house on after school and things like that? But she observes things, but she doesn't really get more information or investigate that in a way to protect her children. And then the other neighbor is like, why would you leave your children alone? She kind of shames her for being a working mom and making the kids go to the bus stop by themselves sometimes, or coming home without her there. And you see what happens. But the interesting thing is that her 9-year-old son, she lets these people she barely knew go to this house every day to clean up after them without anyone else observing, and you don't know what's going on. That's really, in the real world, that's really, you're putting your children in a dangerous spot at that point. But this was a pretty good read. I will rate this a 3.75, just like the second book. In the overall series, I rated a 3.75. Will I read it again? Possibly, if I just need a filler read, but it's not one of those where I'll just go pick it up and read it again. But I will read more Frida McFadden's. I do like thriller, her psychological thrillers, mystery, suspense. I do like the way she writes really, it's really clear and simple to read. It's not things that I necessarily have to look up or words that I have to look up and things of that nature. But let me read the beginning of the book. So this book has a prologue. She tends to write a prologue that foreshadows something, and then you get at the end. But the book starts out, there's blood everywhere. And then it ends with, let me go here, because I love looking at, or in my reading journal, notating the first line and the last lines. But it ends with, I suppose nobody ever suspects the housemaid. Now, that was from the housemaid Martha from The Neighbors, because she ultimately ended up was the one who actually dealing with the husband. Okay, she was stealing, and she was trying to get away from her husband. It's just a lot of, okay, back and forth. But I will say overall 3.75. I enjoyed the reads. The character, like I said, Millie, and a lot of the characters in the Housemaid series, they can be a little immature. Like Enzo, sometimes you just want to shake him, but he seems so nice, so sweet. But in this book, he did lie to Millie a lot. He wasn't straightforward, and that made her even more suspicious and worried, and blood pressure going up. And it was like, dude, you could have just said what was going on the whole time. And so you can get annoyed if you're one to get annoyed a little bit or irritated by immaturity from adults and the back and forth. And it's like, will I, won't I? Or it's like, should I, shouldn't I? Without the critical thinking in it, from the actions, then you may get annoyed with this. But let me know what you thought about this series. I'm so glad I finished this one. I'm in the middle of the Skyland series with Kennedy Ryan, and part 3, Can't Get Enough, doesn't come out until next month, May 13th. Who else is waiting for that one? Yes. So I am waiting for that one. I'll be so happy to finish that one. Once I finish that series, that'll be actually my second series, and that one pretty much have all 4s or above so far. So I'm excited to see what Can't Get Enough is. Love Kennedy Ryan's work. But yeah, so that was my first series that I read for 2025. Listen, if you are new here, I'm Darnaya Darice, first name, middle name. I do lifestyle motivation and bookish content. I would love to know what you're reading or the goals you're working on. How are you working on them? How's it going? I love to encourage, empower, inspire, and challenge you to be your best self, and to always remember to keep rising.